Good afternoon to everyone there. It's a shame that I could not join you. I recently became a mother. I have a 6-month-old baby, and so my care responsibilities did not allow me to be there. But hopefully I will join you in the near future. First, I would like to make some clarifications regarding what I'll be, my presentation. Yes, so, okay, hold on. Seems like you can't see. Are you seeing my presentation in the whole screen? Okay, so the research preliminary results that I will share with you are part of a project in which Ana Maria Trivin, who is part of the Colombia team and is joining us also remotely, in which we participated. Quanta.
Natalia, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we can see your notes. So I thought you might want to know that. If you end your screen share, and then you go, if you choose screen share, advanced options, and then you should be able to share a portion of your screen.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah, and then just move your presentation into the green box. And then you can still see your notes, but nobody else can. Is that,
great,
can you see your notes?
I can see them. This is strange. Okay, so let me, but now you will see only, you will only see part of my screen. Okay,
no, that's perfect. We can only see your slides. So as long as you can see your own notes, then that's okay. You can shift it over to a little bit so that your whole slide is in the green box.
That's the thing. For some reason, my slides are bigger. Okay, so I think this will work. Yeah.
That looks good.
Okay. And so, as I was saying, what I will present now is part of a research slash incidence project that Ana Maria and I worked in, which was called, or is called, Quanta. There are 5 parts to this project. There's the research on the legal structure of Colombia regarding care allocation, the qualitative research which I directed also together with the legal structure, and then other 3 parts of the project, including studies on the labor market, the GEM care model, and an analysis of time use. This is a project that is finishing now, and Ana Maria and I will be moving on to another project, which will also include systems of care, and we will continue to work on these issues together with discrimination in employment and fertility decisions in the relation to care responsibilities. And so let me move on to the country report that we prepared. I will be sharing my time with Ana Maria, and I will report on the preliminary findings of our qualitative work with caregivers and non-caregivers in Bogota. As I said, Ana Maria and I are the country team heads, together with Paola Camelo, who will be presenting tomorrow. And so part of the focus of our research has been on legal rules and how they are not usually considered as part of the problem of the distribution of care work. So therefore, part of our work has been centered on showing the way in which legal rules are, in fact, part of the problem of the distribution of care tasks, because they reify care as a woman's work or women's tasks. This is true not only for Colombia, of course, but for many other countries. And so understanding the ways in which legal rules contribute to the status quo is fundamental in order to change it. Our preliminary findings, after having carried out already 100 interviews with women, including caretakers and non-caretakers in Bogota, suggest that not only the contribution that women make in terms of household work and care work is not acknowledged, but it is used to exclude women from paid work. As a consequence, they are in greater economic dependence and greater poverty. And one of the additional adverse effects to which some of you have alluded to in this morning is a reduction of women's reproductive freedom in terms of a reduction in fertility, in Colombia's fertility rate. So in this presentation, I will go ahead and talk a bit about the Colombian labor market. I won't be able to go much in depth into our analysis of legal rules and show some of the preliminary findings of the fieldwork that we carried out. So just for reference, the Colombian population is 50.3 million people according to data for 2020. This is women's and men's participation rate in the Colombian labor market in more than the last 10 years. Of course, you can see the drop as a result of the pandemic, but otherwise a graph that shows that not much has changed. People outside of the working force, women are at a much higher rate outside of the labor force as compared to men. Similarly, women face higher unemployment than men. And this is all very paradoxical once you realize that women in Colombia have more years of education than men. For some reason, I don't have the data for men in 2019, but it's still the case that women have at least 1 year and the distance has been increasing, more years of education than men. And despite that, as I have shown, women are more outside of the labor force and face more unemployment. Part of the reasons for that is that, at least in 2019, 36% of women who were out of the labor force were so due to family responsibilities. We have found, as I will show, discrimination in access to employment and during the employment relationship as a result of motherhood and care responsibilities. And no wonder then women retire in a lower proportion than men in urban areas. Only 37% of men retire with a pension versus 24% of women. Much less in rural areas where only 10% of men retire versus 6% of women. Just a tiny bit of information regarding time use data. We won't have time to go deeper into this, but in Colombia, 85% of women believe they do their fair share of housework. But actually, when you see the data, women spend much more time on housework than men. And 7 out of 10% people agree that women are better at housework than men. So there's a lot of cultural change to be made. Part of the questionnaires that we applied with women caretakers were designed to figure out employment discrimination as a result of care responsibilities. And that was made in part due to the finding that 32% of the women surveyed in a national survey said that they were required a pregnancy test in the process of getting a job. And that's part of what we found in our fieldwork. As I mentioned, we carried out 100 interviews. The sample size confirmation roughly followed the results of the time use survey available at the time that we made this research design, which was the 2017 survey. According to that survey, 54% of female caregivers in Bogota took care of children under 12 years of age. 17% of them took care of adults over 65 years of age. 5% of them took care of people with disabilities, and 24% of them took care of ill persons. However, we decided to focus our interviews only on the first three groups, and that was a result of ill people lacking conceptual clarity. We were not completely sure what was included in that 24%, and the amount of hours that were invested in this type of care was lower than some of the other groups. So our fieldwork, we finished up with 33 interviews with caregivers of children under 12 years of age, 23 caregivers of adults over 65 years of age, 19 caregivers of people with disabilities, and we included a group of 25 non-caring women, which means they may care for their husbands, one would say, but at least they don't take care of children, people with disabilities, or elderly people. We began to observe saturation of information after conducting 15 interviews in each group. Our sampling was purposive and snowball sampling with several starting points. The interviews were conducted during the pandemic, and so all of them had to be carried out through video conference. They were carried out between September the 2nd, 2021 and February, late February this year. The average duration of the interviews was 1 hour and 30 minutes, and we paid interviewees for their participation in our study. We used en vivo to process and analyze our data, and these were some of the categories that we used. I won't go much into that. Instead, I'll go for some preliminary findings regarding what we saw as common aspects in these groups. So very long working hours for most of the groups. Many women combined domestic work with care, with paid work outside of their homes. The care provision for all groups was offered by a woman, and most of the time it was the mother who provided the care, and in second place, the daughters. The greater need the support by the recipient of care, the caregiver's routine would revolve more around the needs, and daily work days were more strenuous particularly for women who took care of the elder and people with disabilities. We found that many women told us stories about employment discrimination, both in access to employment as a result of care responsibilities. And so questions are being asked in the process of getting a job regarding what responsibilities the candidate may have. And accordingly, they are discarded. Employment discrimination in employment. So even if you do get a job after all these barriers, many women told stories about being discriminated when they asked for permissions, when a family member was sick, or when they required special accommodations in schedule. What was a striking finding is employment discrimination extended even to women who were not mothers and who did not have care responsibilities at the time of the interview, but they were asked whether they planned to be mothers. And so some of them considered that due to their response that they may be mothers in the future, they were not offered the job. The majority of women carers of children under 12 years of age reported feeling more satisfied with life than the majority of women carers of the elderly and people with disabilities. As a result of their exclusion from the labor market, most women do not have access to economic resources when they reach retirement age, and consequently, they face a higher probability of being poor. Unlike caregivers of children under the age of 12, caregivers of people with disabilities and the elderly were often able to calculate how much longer they needed to care for their dependents, very different from people taking care of the elderly or people with disabilities who did not really know when their care work would end. And let me finish with an emphasis in which we will be working more with Ana Maria in the upcoming months. Fertility in Colombia has been in the decline since 1995, and currently it is nationally at 1.8, so below population growth, much like the case of Italy, to which Francesca was alluding. We included some questions in our interviews regarding this topic, and part of what we found was that non-caregivers perceived a high opportunity cost associated with having children. As I mentioned, some of them had even faced employment discrimination in access to employment. I won't take longer. You can see the annex to see how our sample was confirmed. I will pass on to Ana Maria for her to explain the macro model that we also developed in this project.
Well, hi, thank you. As Natalia mentioned, the project has 3 parts. So one of the parts was the qualitative part that Natalia went into that in detail. Then we had 2 parts in the quantitative spectrum. So one was about paid care work and domestic work that was carried out by Paula Herrera, who was also part of this first project that we are closing. And I was leading the part about unpaid care and domestic work. I'm not going to talk a lot about the things that we did and all the statistics we got from our surveys, but looking at the surveys from Colombia. But I'm going to talk about the model that I think is one of the key projects that we carry out at the end of this project. So and Martin is there, who was who was the master of the model, so he can tell me if I'm wrong in anything about the model. But I'm going to talk briefly about it. In this is a computable general equilibrium model. We had heterogeneous agents, we had men and women, and we also included the care and domestic sector. It was very interesting because at the end of the project, we were looking at different policies related with care and see what happened in this model. So I'm going to talk about some of the results. For example, the cash transfers that were a key policy during the pandemic end up making women to get into the house, doing more unpaid work and less paid work. But if we evaluated other types of care policies as investing in care services or giving fiscal incentives to women employment, then we're going to have that women are going to work more in the paid sector, less in the unpaid sector, and also men are going to work more in the paid sector, and they are going also to have more time for leisure. That we don't find anything about leisure for women, but we find this substitution between the paid and unpaid. And with these policies that are all over Latin America of cash transfers, we have to take care that we are, if we give these cash transfers to women that have kids, then we are going to make them stay at home, and we can reinforce stereotypes. So I just wanted to mention this model we did. We had an amazing workshop where we invited people from the local governments and the national governments, where Martin gave an amazing instructions on how to use it. And we also have in our webpage that I encourage everyone to check, because we have this data that I was not able to talk about unpaid care and domestic work, and paid care and domestic work. In that one, we are launching an interactive program where you can start playing with this care policies to see what happens if you give cash transfers, if you give more subsidies to women that have kids, if you give if you invest in care infrastructure. So I encourage you to check the webpage. Thank you.